Brokers Bonkers. I was looking about a week or so ago, week, 10 days, whatever it was, and they were talking about inexperienced yield chasers. It got me upset. Some brokers, some companies that are trying to make you rich want you to get locked in at 2.5 to 3.5% yields on stocks, and I was wondering, why would they do that? Well, you'd have to go 20 or 30 years with that plan to make sufficient money to live off. And who's advising you? Now, if you're making 10 or 12% on covered called ETFs, you really don't need that much advice. There's a lot of covered called ETFs. A lot of people do their own work. There's a dividend investor I was looking at that will do his own covered calls, buys dividend stocks that are paying higher than 2.5, 3.5% or whatever. I buy stocks that have a higher yield than 2.5, 3.5%. But even if you do 2.5, 3.5%, like on Coca-Cola or whatever, you can do covered calls to increase your income on that. So I was watching this other channel, and the guy was talking about how much money he made on covered calls, dividends, and cash secured puts. And then if it goes underwater and you have to buy the stocks, then he did covered calls on the stocks that he was forced to buy. If a broker is so bonkers that he tells you lock yourself into 2.5 to 3.5% for 30 years before you can get away from that job of yours or have a decent retirement income, you know, there's stocks. There's stocks, I don't know whether right now what AT&T or Verizon, I believe they were 7-8%. Why would you lock in at 2.5, 3.5%? Personally, I like to drink Coca-Cola, and I like Mountain Dew. I like those drinks. So, I like them. Now, their dividends are less than 4% the last time I checked. I don't know if it's 3.5 or even if it's 4%. If it's not 5% or higher, I'm not interested in that stock. I'm not interested in that stock. I remember when I was buying Hawaiian Electric years ago, it was at the 5%, and then the equity went up. It made it less attractive because it dropped below 5%, and now Maui had a fire, and now they can't buy, people are not wanting to invest in Hawaiian Electric because their yield was up to 11% because the stock price tanked. I thought it was a good long-term investment until they suspended the dividend. But if you are watching your stocks like a hawk and it drops from 12% to 8%, you want to switch stocks, go ahead. You say, oh, the equity will drop too much. The equity will drop too much. For me, the dividend makes up for it. A lot of times, the position will drop. The stock position will drop in price. I buy it on sale. I find that people who want to give financial advice, now this is not financial advice, this is just my own personal opinion. I want a higher yield now. I want a higher yield today, tomorrow, and 20, 30, 40 years from now. If I die before 40 years from now, if I die next year, okay. But why would I want to be stuck at 2.5, 3.5%? Am I inexperienced because I want more money now? Give me a break. If you're a yield chaser, there's ETFs that are paying over 50%. If the value of that ETF goes down, sell it. Buy another ETF. Buy something else. I look at QQQY and I look at TSLY and JEPY, and all those are giving you more than 50%. And so now, instead of getting 50%, your broker wants you to be at 2.5, 3.5%. That's so you can use him for 20 or 30 years and they can charge you money, in my opinion. I don't need a broker to tell me how to be broker. Brokers are bonkers sometimes. Now, if they were saying, okay, at the very least, you have 2.5 to 3.5% yield on some of these stocks. And if you're close to 4% or 3.5% for Pepsi or Coke, whatever they are right now, you have to check for yourself. I wouldn't touch them until they come at least 5%. You could go right now at certain places and get CDs between 9 and 13%. Other CDs are at 5%. Bonds, excuse me. I remember looking at certain bonds that are 5%, and you can do that. But why would you be stuck in at 2.5, 3.5% when you can get a bond from a reputable company for 5%? Or go to another place and get 9 to 13. I find it to be bad advice. Lock me in at the low yield. It's a low yield trap. It's a safety trap. It's low yield. Don't go for the low yield. I'm not going for the low yield. You can go for the low yield. Go ahead. Spend 20, 30, 40 years with a broker that tells you to stay at a small 2.5, 3.5% yield. Not me. Not when they have stocks like AT&T. I don't have any AT&T right now, and I don't have any Verizon right now. I have things like ARR. Well, that's a dividend trap. And I bought some TSLY. That's like 50% yield. I have another order in for QQQY, which is going to be like 70%. I'm not going to be stuck at 2.5, 3.5% for 30 years. I don't have 30 years to make money. Okay? So, yeah, I'm a little bit upset because they said high yield chasers. What you are trying to tell them is to be safe, and give them a low yield when certain places that have bonds or CDs can get you 9 to 13 in different places. Google it. Have a nice day.